Hello, all you unsung athletes. Welcome to the Unsung Athlete Podcast, where we give a voice to you, the unsung athlete, who trains every day, grinding without excuse, showing up to your life and our world, reward or not. I'm your host, Shannon Rose. Let's get started. So today I want to dive into my own origin story. Who am I, Shannon Rose? How did I become an athlete? And why am I considering myself one of the unsung athletes in today's world? But first, before I get into that, I want to dive into the origin of the word athlete. Athlete comes from the Greek word athlon, which literally translates into prize. If we think about that, then it evolved into this word athlein, which means to compete for a prize. And now we're here in modern era, in modern day, and the definition of an athlete is literally a person who is proficient in sports and other forms of physical exercise. That whole concept of a prize or of a winning or of the need for competition is gone in that definition. And I think that's so interesting when you think of today's unsung athlete. Being an unsung athlete in this podcast means to do something daily, to be proficient in your craft and work towards competency, or to be skilled, to work towards that skill, knowing there's no prize in sight, knowing that your prize might be something internal. I know, like, some of my prizes, some of my rewards in my life are real simple, very basic, and definitely not earth-shattering, such as I'm a better mom when I get to the gym and I hit bags. When I've had an incredible session doing strength and mobility training, I have less injury. I'm able to do motions in my life like pick up heavy things, walk for miles, hike, be active with my kids, jump without hurting myself, fall, and even break fall in the jiu-jitsu format so that I don't break a bone. I mean, I'm entering into, I would say, that mid-stage of my life. I've got another 50% to go. But I want that next 50% to be just incredible and full of that athletic mentality, of mobility, of passion for movement. So as I look at the derivative of this word and where it came from, to be an athlete has moved away from having to have that competition or prize associated with it. Proficiency involves working towards a competency or being skilled, but by no means do you have to be the ultimate subject matter expert. And we have an incredible population who has hacked aging in life, building muscle and endurance to have athletic abilities well into their later quarter of life. You know, I work out with some pretty incredible women at Pro Fitness in Eden Prairie with Kurt Hartman. And as I look around, there are definitely women in their late 70s doing pull-ups, toe push-ups, outpacing me in many other formats, bear crawls. They're getting up, they're getting down, they're lifting, 40 kilogram kettlebells 10 or more times. This era, as I look around, is absolutely incredible. And what I love is that it's not only that you see this in the male population, but you see this across all sexes. And you see young girls. My daughter, who's 12 years old, she likes coming to my strength and mobility training, and she'd rather do 45 minutes of that than go and train in a sport. I still consider her an athlete, but she would rather just continue to show up and work instead of competing for a prize. That also is a really interesting shift in society right now. So with that background, knowing that that's the basis of the Unsung Athlete Podcast, I wanted to dive into my own story. I have, obviously questions that I love to go through, but I'm going to basically interview myself today. And I want to always start my episodes out with love and gratitude, because in my life, love and gratitude drive my everything I do, including my athletics, including my business. They drive almost every decision and action. I bounce them off of, is this out of love? And love is not always romantic love. Love is not always kind and sweet. Love can be fierce. Love can be protective. Love can mean holding accountable. Love-based outcomes are all about abundance. And sometimes you find love and gratitude in the struggle, in the times when you are forced to. I know having been an athlete for, I would say, many years, but I really started playing sports when I was in fifth grade. I was a giant fifth grader. I was probably 5'8", maybe 5'9". I weighed a $140, $150, and I was built like a brick house. And I remember my teacher going, "You need to play basketball." I'm not that old, but our school had just started opening up to women's sports at that age in middle school. And so they said, "Would you like to play for the first girls team?" I said, "Oh my gosh, I have no idea what this is." I was a gentle giant, so I was huge, but I wasn't that confident. I didn't realize my own power. And so I said yes. And that decision to say yes to something I didn't know about actually helped shape a lot of my decisions and mentality moving forward, because that yes pushed me in a direction of an athlete, of an athlete with an athletic mentality. And I started saying yes to things that I didn't know, because that was so rewarding. So I walked onto the court, for my first practice, and this coach, Mr. Avalone, he must have been 5'8" himself. He was built like a bowling ball, and I remember it was kind of balding. He had a gruff, East Coast accent, and he was just mean. He was there to chisel you from being, this crumbly coal into being a shining diamond. That he put pressure on these young girls, including myself, but he was there to provide these guardrails and this confidence that many of us didn't even know we had. So I walk onto the court and I notice this guy's, he has a vein in the middle of his forehead and it's just kind of pulsing. And I'm going, oh my gosh, this guy's scaring me. And he hands me a basketball and he says, "All right, let's learn to dribble." And so, learning to dribble, I learned to play defense a little bit. I learned to shoot under the basket. I find out I'm pretty good as a center, and I'm pretty good at defending and moving my feet. I have no ups. I can't jump for anything, but I've got this giant booty that I can move people around with. And I realized, wow, I've got space. I can command space. I've got power. I have a skill, a natural skill that I can build upon. And it ignited something in me, this want to be better, this want to compete, and this want to do something better than I was actually doing it. And so I kept showing up. And I remember one of the first games I've ever played outside of t-ball or, a pickup game. I was obviously bigger than a lot of the girls out there. And I kept knocking girls down left and right. They would bounce into me and I was like running into a brick wall. And every time I knocked a girl over or I rebounded over them or I, boxed them out and sent them flying, I would go over and I'd reach out my hand and I'd help them up and I'd say, I'm sorry. And, I was so apologetic. I'd hold the ball in my hand while I was helping them up, and then I'd travel. And there was just an internal struggle within me about what it meant to both be an athlete and a person, and realize that sometimes being an athlete means you have to turn off or alter your perception of some of these things, knowing that we've all made choices to come onto the court. We've all made choices to be physical and possibly be knocked down, and it's not my responsibility to take care of everybody, especially on the other teams. So I had jumped up for this rebound and I clobbered this girl on the way down. She fell down. She kind of was whimpering a little bit. I said, I'm so sorry. And I helped her up, and Coach Avalone called a timeout. He came out and he's like marching. He's kind of wobbling out there. And he goes, Shannon, get your ass over here. And so I kind of come over sheepishly. He goes, if you say you're sorry one more time, I'm going to bench you. And he goes, never apologize for your strength. And I can't tell you, it still gives me goosebumps to this day. That was an absolute defining moment. I actually tried to reach out to him a few years ago as I was retelling this story. And yeah, it makes me a little teary-eyed. But to thank him for the change he made in my world. And I come to find out that he's passed. He had a heart attack and has passed away. But I hope that he knows, wherever he is in his spiritual being, that what a difference that made for me. Because from that moment forward, I wasn't afraid to be strong or to command a room. I wasn't afraid to say yes to my power, and I didn't need to apologize for being me and being incredible. So that in and of itself, once that shift happened in me, I considered myself an athlete from that day on. And though I didn't play basketball much past the, sophomore year of high school, it didn't matter. That sport was a defining moment for me, even though I only play pickup games now and shoot baskets with my kids. I do other sports now, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit. But for that reason, I consider myself an athlete because in my mind, I'm constantly showing up every single day to hone my craft and to be better physically in this world. So I'm grateful for that experience. And I love him and I love myself for having the power to make that shift, even when I was so young and not knowing, but just being able to say yes. So in my athletic career, I can call it, I guess, my lifetime, I've played many sports. I'm not going to list them all, but some of the more defining sports I played, and I was so fortunate. We moved a lot. My dad was a corporate leader, and so if you are a corporate leader yourself, or you've been in a family where your parents were corporate leaders, those jobs shift every 3 to 5 years. I myself am now a leader in corporate America, and yes, there's shifts every 3 to 5 years. And so in doing that and in having those shifts, we moved a lot. And during that time when we were out on the East Coast, one of the really cool experiences I got to have out in New York, near Poughkeepsie in Hyde Park, New York, which is about an hour north of New York City along the Hudson River. If you've never been, I highly, highly suggest to go to upstate New York. It is one of the most beautiful, understated places in our in our US of A. But I had the privilege of rowing crew. Crew is one of those long, skinny rowing boats. You can have one person, you can have two, you can have four, or you can have eight. And I've rode in fours and eights. Again, being tall and having these powerful legs allowed me to have such power in that sport. And I was 6, which meant if you think about an 8-seat boat, the 6 is like right in the middle, which means I was like the engine. Everyone else was focused on keeping pace, or they were focused on steering, or they were focused on adding to the power. But it was one of my core jobs to make sure that the engine stayed running, was at full capacity when it needed to, picked up, slowed down, whatever it was. That was my job, was to provide the power. And if you can imagine, you're kind of in the middle, but you're so vital because you can't shut off. If you shut off, the whole thing shuts off. And the coxswain is yelling to keep pace, and the coxswain is like, power 10, or, move to the left. But you can't really think about those things because you're just constantly giving power. And so you're kind of lonely in the middle, and you need to go into these deep places in your head to just that athletic mentality, which I know many of you have, that place where you don't really hear anything else but your own internal dialogue. And I know I've talked to many athletes, but that dialogue can get quite dark. And you just go into this place, you turn your brain into this soul focus, and you almost detach from the exhaustion and the pain and the injury and all of those things that are going on. Your muscles are breaking down, you're dehydrated, got tons of lactic acid, you're sore from whatever race you just did. And yet, that you can't stop. No matter how much it hurts, no matter how much you honestly think you're dying, which, your body is kind of going to this state of incredible fight, and you just keep going. And so that's where I learned about that place, that athletic place in my brain where you reduce all the noise and all of a sudden it's just you. That's it. And for that high school, I was rowing for the high school team in middle school because I was so large. And I remember we were doing these races. We were doing races on the rowing machines and on the ergs. And what you did is the coach would come in and they would start the machine and then they would leave. And you'd be in basically the row house or a side barn all by yourself for these sprints. And this was during the fall when the races were longer. So you would do a 10-minute sprint. Now, 10 minutes doesn't seem like a long time if you're going on a run, but a 10-minute sprint to keep your pace there's like this, I don't remember all the details, but there's this timer, and you want to keep your rows under this 2-minute point. And so 2 minutes per kilometer or whatever it is. And so I kept it under, well under that 2-minute point, the whole entire 10 minutes. And all I remember is the clock stopped. My coach came in and she said something about that was incredible. That was a new record for the team and for the high school. And I just, instead of feeling excited and proud, I just puked all over the floor. I thought to myself, oh my gosh. So again, I got this verbal praise, but I didn't get my name anywhere. I didn't get a prize. But for whatever reason, I wanted to do my best. Even if I didn't get anything, even if it was just for those words. So I'm not going to get into this. I'll probably do some more episodes later on about me and the different sports I've played. But I really wanted to just wrap this up with saying that to this day, let's say 8 years ago, I refound my athletic capabilities in Muay Thai. And I'd never done martial arts in my entire life. But when I found the academy here in Minnesota, specifically I started at the Academy Eden Prairie in Minnesota, and now I'm under Burnsville Mixed Martial Arts Academy with Nikita and Gus over there. They're incredible. If you're ever in Minnesota and want to train, look them up or message me. I'd be happy to give you their information. You can come try class. But I refound myself as an athlete and realized that mixed martial arts was a way that I could continue to train, continue to become competent and skilled each and every day while supporting my life, which is huge because my life consists of multiple businesses, kids in middle school and elementary school. I'm at a high output time of my life, and I don't have a ton of time except early in the morning, maybe a little bit of time midday, late at night, where I get to hone this craft. And I choose every day not to just find time but to make that a priority. Because being an athlete drives almost everything else in my life. Having an athletic mentality where I am constantly making myself better and finding ways for myself to move better, it makes me better. Every other aspect of my life, it makes better. I just become a better person, and therefore I bring that energy into the world. I love myself. I love my family. I love my work. I love the world. And therefore that spreads and makes our world a better place, which is my ultimate why in the world. So I can't wait to keep talking to interesting unsung athletes and finding out what their origin story is, what has maybe come in the way of them being an athlete, what keeps them going, how do they overcome the struggles of showing up even though, life continues. They're not in high school or college anymore where life was simpler and your responsibilities were a lot less. You're now in your 40s and you've got kids and businesses. And how do you keep being better? How do you keep that athletic mentality? And then how are they inspired? How are they influenced? How do they influence others and help others hone their craft? So I can't wait to dive into these stories and meet these incredible unsung athletes. Thank you for joining us on the Unsung Athlete Podcast, where we give a voice to you, the unsung athlete. If you would like to be a guest on the Unsung Athlete Podcast, reach out to me on my social media platforms or website. I'm your host, Shannon Rose. Keep grinding without excuse.